What does the Catholic Catechism tell us? Well, to be sure, the Catholic Catechism teaches about life after death, about heaven and hell, and then some. So let's look at some of what the Catechism says. Number 1021. Death puts an end to human life as a time open to either accepting or rejecting the divine grace manifested in Christ. The New Testament speaks of judgment primarily in its aspect of the final encounter with Christ in His second coming, but also repeatedly affirms that each will be rewarded immediately after death in accordance with his works and faith. The parable of the poor man Lazarus and the words of Christ on the cross of the good thief, as well as other New Testament texts, speak of a final destiny of the soul, a destiny which can be different for some and for others. And another paragraph from the Catechism tells us, each man receives his eternal retribution in his immortal soul at the very moment of his death, in a particular judgment that refers to his life to Christ, either entrance into the blessedness of heaven through a purification or immediate and everlasting damnation. And another one, those who die in God's grace and friendship are perfectly purified, live forever with Christ. They are like God forever, for they see Him as He is, face to face. Catechism says, to live in heaven is to be with Christ. Also, by His death and resurrection, Jesus Christ has opened heaven to us. The life of the blessed consists in the full and perfect possession of the fruits of the redemption accomplished by Christ. He makes partners in His heavenly glorification those who have believed in Him and remained faithful to His will. Heaven is the blessed community of all who are perfectly incorporated in Christ. How about the reality of hell? What does the Catechism say there? Well, 1033. We cannot be united with God unless we freely choose to love Him. But we cannot love God if we sin gravely against Him, or against our neighbor, or against ourselves. To die in mortal sin without repenting and accepting God's merciful love means remaining separated from Him forever by our own free choice. This state of definite self-exclusion from communion with God and the blessed is called hell. So again, the point here, people, well, God wouldn't send anyone to hell. Catechism says, no, He doesn't. It's your choice. You choose Christ or you don't choose Christ. And how do you choose? Well, by your faith, but how you live. If you're trying your best to live according to His commandments, especially the commandment of love. Yes, the teaching of the Church, it affirms the existence of hell and its eternity. And the Catechism says, immediately after death, the souls of those who die in a state of mortal sin descend into hell, where they suffer the punishment of hell, eternal fire, whatever that eternal fire is. The chief punishment, though, of hell is the separation from God. We're meant to be with God. And so the punishment of hell is not being in union with God. Now, how about purgatory? We Catholics believe in purgatory, right? Well, it teaches, this is a good thing, because to be in the presence of God, we have to be holy, we have to be pure, cleansed from our sin. And purgatory is, as 1030 says, all who die in God's grace and friendship, but still imperfectly purified, are indeed assured of their eternal salvation. But after death, they undergo purification so as to achieve the holiness necessary to enter the joy of heaven. And the Church gives the name purgatory to this final purification of the elect, which is entirely different than the punishment of the damned. Okay, so far I've given you proof, of what happens after death from a religious, faith, Catholic perspective. But we ought to really ask the experts. What happens after death? We really have to ask those people who have died and come back to tell us. Because there are people that have died either on an operating table or in an accident, and their heart has stopped, they're clinically dead, and for 2, 4, 5 minutes, they're dead. But they have, many of them, remarkable experiences that are called near-death experiences, and it's really uncanny how similar the stories are when you put all of them together. Many people have had near-death experiences, or we call them NDEs. And these people, again, they're clinically dead, and their heart has stopped beating, but in the minutes before the doctor or the paramedic could revive them to get the heart going again, jumpstart the heart and get it pumping again, well, these people have incredible similar experiences. Now, there's those in the medical profession who try to explain it in medical terms, saying that, well, these experiences are caused by physiological changes of the brain cells dying because of lack of oxygen or release of endorphins or whatever the case may be. There's explanations medically, but still, the experience of these people who had these near-death experiences, really, it has a lasting positive effect on their lives, the rest of their lives, before they die again. Dr. Melvin Morse, MD, the Associate Professor of Pediatrics at the University of Washington, gives these results from his study of near-death experienced people. He said, of all the people he studied, he said, adults who had NDEs, once they're revived, of course, they give more money to charity than the control subjects. They also volunteer in charities and the community more. They enter helping professions. They do not suffer from drug abuse. Most of them, the percentage is way low. They eat more fresh fruit and vegetables than the control population. And he concluded, he says, a near-death experience is good for you. It'll help your living, to put perspective on who you are. Well, in 1975, there was Dr. Raymond Moody, his best-selling book, Life After Life. It focused its attention on near-death experience. In fact, he's the doctor, he's the one who coined the term near-death experience. And Moody recorded and compared the experiences of 150 people who had these near-death experiences. And he said that there are at least 9 elements that generally occur during these near-death experiences. A strange sound is heard by these people, kind of a buzzing sound or a ringing noise. But then a peace and a painlessness that even though they were under great pain in the dying process, when they have died, they feel peace and euphoria. They have an out-of-the-body experience, many of them. Dying often have the sensation of rising up and actually looking down on their body as the surgeon and paramedics are trying to revive them. They have an experience of kind of a spiritual realm. There's a tunnel experience. Many of them experience being drawn at a very quick speed through a dark tunnel towards a light. Many others rapidly just go to heaven. Instead of the tunnel, they report rising up into heaven immediately and almost like in outer space, looking at the earth below like you're in outer space. They report seeing people of light. That people are around them, they are greeted by even those who have passed into eternity before them, and they glow with light. They report seeing a being of light, one that shines greater than others, that the light embraces them and is such a love that it's indescribable. And some of them have identified this being of light as God, Jesus, or some other religious figure. And they have a life review. Many of them have a life review that this being of light presents the dying or the person who has died, kind of a panoramic review of every event of their lives, especially their relationships with other people and the love that they gave or didn't give. And almost universally, these people who have near-death experiences have a reluctance to return. They don't want to come back to their bodies. The being of light sometimes tells the dying person, you must go, or sometimes they have a choice to remain or to go back. And the people who do choose to return only do so because of the loved ones they do not wish to leave behind. They feel they have some work to do with the loved ones that they have on earth. Now, here's one account. This man's from Northern Ireland. This happened in February 2009. And he went to the hospital for a simple one-day procedure. He said he was calm, he was relaxed, he was waiting to be called into the operating room. And when they came and got him and brought him into the operating room, they put him on the operating table, and he was told that he would have 3 shots for anesthesia. The first one you'll feel like a pinch. The second one you probably won't feel anything. The third one you'll be out. Well, the anesthetist stood by his side, and the surgeon started to give him the 3 shots. The one, he felt the pinch. The second one, didn't feel anything. And upon the third one, he said he felt a sharp pain in his forehead, and he felt he was being sucked out of his body. And then it went black. But then, he said, I stood in this beautiful garden, and I was surrounded by a stone wall, and behind this stone wall I could hear children playing, having wonderful fun. I was surrounded by what I could explain only as tranquility and love and peace and harmony. And then in that garden, 3 little figures came dancing around me. They glowed with light. I really couldn't make out their faces, and they didn't say anything to me, but they assured me that everything was going to be all right. But it wasn't my time to stay here. The next thing I remember, he says, I was standing in the operating room looking down on my body as the surgeons tried to do something and fix me up. And I saw the anesthetist punching my chest in the heart area, and all of a sudden I felt myself hovering over my body and then sinking back into it, still hearing the children singing and laughing, but then all of a sudden the laughter was gone and it was replaced by what I could explain only as panic. I heard surgeons shouting at nurses. I had an oxygen mask over my mouth. I tried to rip it off and they put it back on. Then I remember being in a private ward, and the nurses were talking to me, trying to settle me down. And I asked one of the nurses, where are the children? Where are the children? And why was the doctor punching my chest? And as I told her more and more details, she obviously got disturbed and went out of the room. The anesthetist came back and just told me to relax. I went through a big ordeal and just relax. Well, that night, before bedtime, the anesthetist came back and paid me a visit and asked me to go over what I told the nurses. And I recalled in my experience of what I saw and what I saw in the operating room. And he admitted that my heart did stop for 2 minutes and 20 seconds. But he said, you just must have heard the nurses talk about your condition. You know, you didn't really have that experience. But he said, I'm convinced the experience was real. That what I experienced was real. And upon reflection on what happened, when I returned home, I couldn't get those 3 little dancing figures out of my mind. He says, now I have 3 daughters at home, but they're at home. They're growing fine. And it was really bothering me. And when I was sharing with my wife my experience in the hospital and about these 3 figures dancing, telling me everything was all right, she says, don't you remember? I had 3 miscarriages. And the man was convinced, he's still convinced, that those 3 little children dancing around him were the 3 lives that he helped bring into existence.